All right, I guess we'll get started. Welcome. My name is Jim Cogan. I'm your Assistant City Manager, and we are very excited that you came out to Paso Talks tonight. This is one of the tools that we are using to improve our communication with the community, improve community engagement. It's something that we are going to be video recording, as you can see, and we're going to be using microphones tonight. The recordings are actually going to be placed on our new website, which is another one of the tools that we're using to improve community engagement. It's more proactive, so please take a look at it. You can sign up for information that'll be sent directly to you as soon as things are posted, so you don't have to go looking for it in the future. And it has the ability to stream video. So these videos will be on the website and available so that people can look at them, can share them. Please send them through social media. Really what we're trying to do, this is the second in 6 talks where we're going to be covering 13 different subject areas. And what we have seen as we've gone out and we've had community meetings about different projects and different policies is that there's a lot of misunderstanding about some of the work that we do and some of the ways that we serve the community. So we were really interested in having an effort to get out and let folks know about that work that we do on your behalf in a way that is absent any project, so that there's nothing specific here other than us trying to just better communicate with the community. And so it's awesome that you are all out here tonight. I was talking to one couple who is relatively new to the community, and this was their date night, so we're very excited about that. We're going to start marketing it that way. You know, we've got free cookies. Come on out for a date. But the other thing that we wanted to do is, many of you are aware that there's an election coming up in November. We've got some great people who are running for office, and we wanted to make sure that we provided them with some good information as they were going through that effort, which, as many of you know, is difficult and time consuming, so we want to try and make it easier. In the past, we have provided candidates with this really thick binder, and about 20 minutes into the description about what the city is and what the city does, you know, their eyes understandably glaze over. And so we wanted this to be an easier way to get information out. And so that's the other aspect of Paso Talks, which brings me to wanting to introduce by group a few folks. So we've got our mayor, Mayor Martin here, and one of our council members, Councilmember Reed, who are here. If you gentlemen want to raise your hands, and thank you for being here. We've got some great city staff who are here, and if you have any questions, I'm going to go over our rules real quick in a second, but if you have any questions and you want to engage in conversation, that's what we're here for, and we really want to talk to you, so please feel free to grab any of them, and I'll make it easier for you. If you're a city staff member here, could you raise your hand? Great. And then last but not least, we've got some candidates for city council here. So if our candidates could raise their hand, that would be great, because you know, feel free to talk to those folks as well. We really appreciate them coming out for this. So in just a second, I'm going to introduce our police chief and fire chief who are going to come up and give the presentation. But I wanted to go over some quick rules. I'm going to moderate the Q&A after the presentation, and I'll call on folks so you know when your turn is. We're asking that because we're recording this, that everyone use the microphone, kind of treat it like a magic talking stick. As soon as you get the microphone, you can feel free to ask your question, and but not necessarily engage in a whole conversation back and forth with the speakers, because we want everyone to have the opportunity to ask their first question. And then that's the second rule, is that we're going to have everybody get the opportunity to ask one question if they want to, before going back to people to ask a second question. And again, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Please grab us, talk to us, get our email addresses. We are here because we want to engage in the community. And with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker tonight, the Chief's Rochambeau, and fortunately Chief won, and so he's going first.
Good evening. And just by way of housekeeping, I know a lot of people aren't familiar with coming to the Public Safety Center. If you need to use the restroom, it's just out to the left. So there's 2 restrooms right there, just so everybody knows. So happy you came out tonight to listen to both of us speak. It's always exciting for us. We were talking about this to be able to give the community a little bit of information about our respective departments. A lot of times there's a lot of talk in the community. Both of our departments touch a lot of different facets of city operations when we talk about things. Some of the things you may have already attended, growth and traffic and expansion, plus what we do on a day-to-day, everyday basis. So what I'd like to do is start off and talk a little bit about my department. So right now, we're authorized 35 police officers. That's everybody from top to bottom. Currently, we don't have 35 officers, but if we were successfully able to fill all of our positions right now, we'd have 35 police officers. So the question is, what do we do with those 35 police officers on a daily basis? What do we do? A couple things that we really focus on. One, our ultimate goal always as a police department is to prevent crime. That's what we call being proactive. When we're proactive, we're out there doing crime fighting measures, we're educating the community, we're trying to help you make sure that your things don't get stolen, all of those kind of things. That's our number one goal, is to prevent crime from happening. If we do that, it kind of goes back, I don't know how many of you are familiar with history and Sir Robert Peel. He made a comment that's just brilliant. He said, police are the only ones, we're measured by the absence of crime. So when there isn't anything going on and we're kind of hiding in the background, that's when we get our good approval ratings. The second thing is, when crime does happen, you want us to solve it, right? So you pick up your phone, you call your police department and tell us that there's something that's happened, and we respond out there, and that's called reactive policing, when we have to go out and kind of do something after the fact. So those are kind of the ways, a couple of the ways that we measure how effective we are as a police department, whether we're being proactive in preventing crime or we're being reactive in solving crime after it's occurred. A couple other things that we do, and probably the number one complaint that I get throughout the community is traffic. We have a lot of visitors that come through. We have nearly 22 square miles of city that we deal with on an everyday basis. So whether it's parking within people's community or traffic accidents, speeders on particular roadways, I get a lot of comments and feedback regarding traffic in the community. And the last thing that I kind of summarize all these are super high level, is we like to help improve quality of life within the community. I think that that's what we do, and that fills up a lot of our time. Whether it's dealing with homeless issues, mental health issues, or just general complaints. I kind of tease sometimes that because we're open 24/7 and our dispatchers answer the phones all the time. I remember when we had our El Nino year that someone called us and said, my pool, it's overflowing during the middle of a storm. And so those are, the quality of life issues, but they know that if they call their police department or their fire department 24/7, we're gonna answer the phone, and no matter how big or small the problem is, we're gonna do our best to help people. So, what I promised to do tonight is give you a little bit of an overall view of the community and what I call my safety assessment. And there's 2 components to that. There's one, it's kind of how does the community feel about its safety, right? And maybe that's what you talk with your neighbor about, whether you're the victim of a burglary or maybe you saw the police do something great, and kind of you have these anecdotal conversations amongst you about how you feel the police department and what you think about safety within the community. The second component of that is maybe some of the numbers. What do the numbers show? So a lot of people may not know, but every month we report our crime statistics to the FBI. It goes through the state, then it goes to the FBI, and those numbers get published regularly, and it's kind of a measure between other cities in our county, within the state, or even federally, how we compare to other people. So we call that our metrics. So, anecdotally, right, how do you feel within the community? That can be a tough one to answer. So last year, the city undertook a community survey to answer some of these questions. And what we found out is that 77% of the community rated their police department as great or good, which is pretty darn good in my opinion, because I know nationally, if you look at Gallup polls or some of those, that police approval ratings are usually in the mid-50s somewhere. I think they're hovering around 57%. 77% for a police department is outstanding these days, and it really actually measures a lot of other communities, matches up with a lot of other communities. But on a broader, or I guess at a more focused scale, how do you feel safe? Do you feel safe in your neighborhoods? 95% of the people said, yes, I feel safe in my neighborhood. 96% feel safe going downtown or in commercial areas. So it kind of gives you an idea, at least for me as a police chief, how gauging, putting, that you say, have your finger on the pulse of the community, where we need to improve, where we're doing well. I think overall the community feels, we're doing a good job. Do we have areas for improvement? Certainly, and we'll talk about those. So we'll talk about a couple things when we talk about the metrics now, what we report to the government and what we publish as far as how do our actual numbers jive with how you're feeling. The first area that we're going to talk about is violent crime. So what I did is I went to the FBI's website, the numbers that we report to them, and I compared our crime analysis, what's going on in the area of violent crime in California and what's going on here in Paso Robles. You can see these numbers might be, this screen's a lot bigger, it's better than the one I'm looking at over there. But you can see right there that we're about 74% below California average in violent crime. So last year we had 115 acts of what the government those aren't individuals, that's the ratio per 100,000. 115 was the ratio compared to 445 throughout California. I went back so you could get an apples to apples comparison of 2016, and that ratio was 209. So on average, we're 74% below averages in violent crime, which is great. We have a safe community. That's what that tells us. So those are the numbers by year. Going back to 2014, we had a high of 125. And when you think of violent crimes, I apologize, I probably didn't explain that well. You think about things like robberies, you think about rapes, you think about aggravated assaults, assault with a deadly weapon. Those kind of things are what are classified as violent crimes. Any kind of gang violence, those kind of things. So we had a peak of 125 in 2014, and that number has been dropping steadily. So we're at a low of 37 in 2017, and we're probably on track to match those numbers by the end of 2018, as we're a little bit more than halfway through the year. How about property crimes? So when we think of property crimes, we think about your house getting burglarized, we think about your car getting broken into, we think about petty thefts or shoplifting. All of those are what we call property crimes. And those represent the bulk of what we do here in Paso Robles at the police department. You can see here that our numbers are above state averages in this area. We're about 12% above what's going on across the state. So that tells you that we do have some room for improvement when it comes to property crimes. When we talk about preventing crimes or solving crimes, this puts us in the reactive solving crimes category. So by year, these are kind of the numbers. You can see in 2014, they were lower, they peaked in 2015, and they've been dropping steadily. So even though we're still above state averages, you can see that the officers and the men and women here at the police department have been really working hard to bring down those numbers. We're on track to probably match 2017 numbers at this point. Traffic collisions. So our traffic collisions, they peaked in 2015 with 557. However, that number has also been steadily declining. And I attribute that mainly to, in 2016, was when we were able to reestablish a motor officer position. So Officer Ketchum is our one single motor officer that we have in the city. And I don't believe it's any coincidence that with his focused effort on improving traffic safety within the community, those numbers have been steadily declining as well. Although we still are averaging around 500 traffic collisions a year, which is a lot. Total events. So everything that we respond to, whether it's something the officers initiate in the field or whether it's a community member calling us and picking up the phone, we respond to almost 45,000 events per year. So that's a lot of events that we go to. So we talk about proactive policing. How many officers do we need currently? We talked about that number of 35 police officers that were currently authorized. We recently undertook a staffing analysis, a look at our calls for service, and we did what we call a workload study to determine how many police officers we actually need. Some of you that might be familiar with this, you might remember years ago they went with ratios of like 1.4 to 1.6 officers per 1,000, and if you multiply that out now by 32,000 people within the community, we should have somewhere around 47. But most people, at least in best practices terms, they realize that those ratios, they don't tell you why you need a police officer. They're just something that a lot of cities compare themselves. Oh, you have 1.4, well, we should have 1.4. But we took it a step beyond that and kind of looked at why we need more. So there's what we call the rule of 60, or 60-40 split. So what that means is that according to the International Association of Chiefs of Police and the ICMA, which is the International or City County Managers Association, so you got police chiefs and you got city managers, both of those agree on this particular formula to figure out how many police officers we need. So the 60-40 rule, 60% of my police officers' time should be dedicated to doing reactive police work. That's what they say. They realize that you're never going to eradicate crime or issues from a community, but no more than 60% of their time should be answering calls for service. So you pick up the phone and say, I need a police officer for whatever reason. 60% of my officers' time should be dedicated to that. 40% should be what we call proactive police work, going out and preventing crime from happening. So going into the community and saying, hey, did you know your window's down in your car? And I see your purse there. That would be a great way to, lock that up and prevent your car from being broken into. So we call that the 60-40 rule. So the measure for a police department is how far above we go on that 60% tells us whether we're more reactive than proactive. So we did our workload study, and I looked at community calls for service. So this is the half of the equation that we talk about. When you pick up the phone and you call our police department, we went to 23,000, almost 24,000 calls from the community last year in 2017. And you can see that that's about a 30% jump from 2011. So in 2011, we had just over 18,000. By 2017, we're pushing almost 24,000, and we're on track for that again on 2018. That's how we decide whether that 60-40 rule and where we are. So what did we find out? Well, we found out that between July 13th and September 13th, we started tracking how many times we weren't able to go to a call. 517 times we did not have a police officer available to respond to somebody's need or request for assistance. You pick up the phone, you ask for a police officer. 517 times we weren't able to respond. We're on pace for that to hit about 3,000 this year. So 3,000 times somebody will call the police department, and we, on the first call, won't have somebody available to go. That equates to about a 35% probability that we're not going to have somebody available. That tells us that we're largely reactive. Almost 90% of the time we're dedicated to answering calls for service as opposed to proactive police work, which is, remember, that's our main job, is to prevent crime from happening. So what did the numbers tell us? How many police officers do we need for a community our size? 60 police officers. That's where we should be. Currently, we're authorized 35 police officers. I broke down the calls for service hour by hour, day by day, averaged them out, and this is the graph that you see behind you. It shows that in our peak time, we need about 9 officers to be able to respond to, within that 60-40 rule, to be able to respond to the community and still maintain our proactive posture as opposed to totally being reactive. 60 police officers. So I was able to give this, as a preview to some of the city staff, and there was a little bit of confusion. They were like, Chief, what are you trying to tell us? You're telling us that things are good, but you're telling us things are bad. There's maybe some mixed messages. Well, what I want the community to know is we're a safe community. We really are. And I think that really speaks to the relationship that we have with our community in helping us solve crime. There's no doubt that it's not the police in general that are keeping us, the violent crime rates down, although we work hard. I think it largely speaks to San Luis Obispo County and Paso Robles in general. We have some great people that live here, and we attract good people, and that really helps with the violent crime. But the property crime, on the other hand, is an area where we need to improve, and we're working hard to do that. You can see our numbers are still dropping, but we still have a lot of work to do, and it's going to take staffing to get us there. We're going to need to increase our ranks and increase our numbers if it's important to the community to be able to see those numbers slowly decline. The other part about that is that prevention is the key to success, and that is where we come into a partnership with you. We need the community to be able to work with us to help us reduce those calls for service by preventing crime from happening in your neighborhoods, either reporting it early or locking up your doors, keeping your windows tight, making sure your purse isn't out for someone to see, or your iPad or your laptops. Those are the kind of things that will really help the community, and some of the efforts or some of the crime prevention measures that we're going to be working on to really help us in a partnership. So those are some of the overview of what's going on in the police department, where we are, what's going on. And I went second last time, so I had a question and answers in there, but I think my cohort is going to come up and talk about his side of the house, and then we'll answer some questions.